Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
This is CampHacker. Come find our show notes and our blog for camp directors and leaders at camphacker.tv.
Good day, and welcome to our podcast. This is CampHacker, episode 76, recorded on November 5th, 2014. On today's show, professional development for camp pros. If you would like easy, automatic, free updates of our podcast, you can subscribe in iTunes or use the free Stitcher app. This week's CampHacker podcast is sponsored in part by camp pros like you who support the show on Patreon. If you've got even one good idea from the CampHacker podcast, you could show your support for the show for as little as $1 per episode. We've got some great rewards too, just like a Kickstarter campaign. Please go to patreon.com/camphacker. And by the Camp Owners and Directors Association. You provide quality camp experiences for children, helping them grow and gain independence. We help you achieve your vision. Check us out at campownersanddirectors.com. And by Camp Easy. To save on your listing in a camp directory that parents love, use the code CampHacker for 70% off the price of a full camp registration. We hope you enjoy the CampHacker show.
Hello, Camp Pros, and welcome to the Camp Hacker podcast. My name is Travis Allison. I run a blog and a podcast network about running a great summer camp at camphacker.tv.
And my name's Gabrielle, and I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Oro, which is an all-girls camp situated in the Laurentians in Quebec.
And my name's Joe Richards. I'm the executive director at Pierce Williams Christian Center, which is a summer camp and retreat facility in southwestern Ontario, located about halfway between Detroit and Toronto.
Well, welcome to the show, you two. We're sorry that Dan couldn't be here today, but he got called into a meeting, so we're not able to get Dan on. I should say right from the very start, we love having extra co-hosts come and join us, and we have had a crew of people some have come regular, some have been one or two times. But if you ever want to be on the show, please email me, Travis at camphacker.tv, because I know that one of the most consistent pieces of feedback we've had is that people love it when we bring on guests and get different perspectives. So if you want to be on the show, you don't have to there's not a lot of technical stuff involved in it. You really just have to be able to use Skype to do it. So we certainly invite you to do that. The other thing I would say in terms of housekeeping stuff is that if you have learned anything from this show, appreciated what you've taken from this, or want to say thank you to our co-hosts, then I invite you to go to camphacker.tv/love, and that will put out a tweet saying that you appreciate the show and maybe help us get some more people who listen. And we're really very grateful about that. So we appreciate any help that you can give us. Today's topic is about camp culture and how we build a culture that helps sustain camp and helps us bring in more campers and attract great staff and give that thing to our camps that makes them unique and special. Many of us can say we have swimming, canoeing, arts and crafts, but I think it's the culture that really sets us apart. It's the thing that is the magical part of what we do. And when people tell stories about what happened to them because of summer camp, I really think it's most often the culture that comes up in those discussions. And Joe, this was an idea that you had presented. Did you have a particular question or thought that you wanted to start us off with?
Well, as what I had said is that, how to create and sustain a camp culture in a non-full-time staffed facility. I think this discussion could go towards full-time staffed facilities, which it's a lot easier to create a culture. But I was thinking of my home camp. So my home camp is Kennesari Camp. My brother's currently the chair of the board there, and we've talked a lot in the past couple of years about that culture and the lack thereof of a culture that is positive and sort of moving forward. And so it's really how to pass on the best of our culture and how to really promote the use of what we do as a camp and those little tips and tricks for creating a lasting culture. So it's one of those things that that I think about a lot, because our culture here is very much based on being able to do whatever we want. That's sort of the culture that we've created, and part of that is really having people understand that change is a good thing. Years ago, when I was at the Taylor Staton camps, I had a chat with Mike Sladden, who was the owner of Pathfinder at the time, and he said in one of his talks early in the summer, in one of his morning moment talks, he talks about how change is part of their culture. Thus, people get it into their head that when he introduces new things, it's just natural that it's part of their culture. So it's not at some of the camps where you've been around for 80 or 90 or 100 years, it's much harder to change things because people are like, that's not the way we do it. But if you create change as part of that culture, it's much easier. And so that's the first step I would suggest to anybody and to any camp, is to really build change in as part of the culture, and part of the interview process and part of the staff training and part of the evaluations is, how can we make it better? What can we change to make things better? How do we change to stay relevant? Mm-hmm. That's really one of my keys. And my staff, my summer staff, recently went through the Back on Track program, which we'll talk about later in the show, as a tool of the week. And I wasn't sitting in on it, but Ika ran it, and she said that what I said to her beforehand is, I said, make sure they understand, again, we can change whatever we want. Mm-hmm. Like we are not attached to pretend we're not attached to anything. Pretend we can redo the whole thing. And then she looks at me and says, except meal times. And I said, well, the meal times we need to work within to get our cook on and off the site. We need to set those times, but anything else could change. So I think change for us is one of those things that once you build that into culture, bringing in new things to add to culture is much easier, because then there's not the resistance from people.
That philosophy, Joe, of being prepared for and constantly looking for and thinking about change reminds me a lot of the work that Jack Schott and I have done on the Kaizen mentality. We had a podcast a couple of years ago about thinking like Toyota, about looking for constant ways to change and make small continuous improvements. And that idea of small continuous improvement is the Japanese word Kaizen has come to symbolize that. And that philosophy also helps to go into it thinking that nothing is holy, nothing is going to be, that we're willing to examine everything and at least need to be able to justify ourselves, just justify everything we are doing. And one of the lenses to look at that with this Kaizen philosophy is looking for waste. And so if you are open to the idea and getting past, but this is how we've always done it, then you're able to look for waste in money, in time, and human resources are the big three issues there. And that, once you start to look for waste and be willing to change, then culture comes with it, because you develop this culture, exactly like you said, of being open to change.
Yeah, and I think when you're willing to examine what is working and what isn't working, and even what is working but can change, I think it creates. And I remember that episode with Jack, and it's a lot easier to institute new things when they're willing to look at everything differently. Churches have a quote, and I believe I heard this quote from Jim Penner. Is it Jim Penner who used to speak for? Jim said, the dying words of any church are, "We don't do it that way,"
right?
Right, or we don't do that. And so that's always stuck in my head, because he spoke at a United Church conference I attended at Five Oaks years ago, and I was. It was very prevalent that if that's your whole philosophy, we don't do anything new, then that's fine. The world changes with or without you. It's not going to care. You can never step into the same river twice. So, if you want to be that camp, that's fine. Go ahead for however long you're going to be around. And Travis, you do a talk on the end of summer camp or the death of summer camp, and it's the same. People who are unwilling to change leads to a slow dying off of that camp's culture.
Right. And Gab, I'm going to come to you, I promise, but I just have one thought to wrap up this that Joe just said. Or maybe I don't. I'll think about what that was going to be. And Gab, how do you feel about camp culture?
Maybe it was too genius. I'll come back to you later. No, I'm of the same mentality. Oro's been around for over 90 years now, and there was definitely that saying, "We don't do it that way." It was more, "That's the Oro way." Was actually the saying.
Yeah.
And I think when we start talking about change, sometimes some people get a little bit nervous because they think that what you're actually talking about is the core of your organization. And I think that change is not there to shift the core of your organization. It's there to support, and it's there to reinforce. And it's just like doing improvements on a house. You don't build it once and then there you go, you've done. It's finished. There's improvements, there's foundation that you need to, check regularly. Obviously my father's a carpenter and I use a lot of carpentry analogies, but I think that asking yourself, why do we do this? What's the reason behind it? What's the point? Is a very important place to start. And if you have staff members that are unwilling to accept certain changes, it's worth it to ask, why are they on your team? So I think you really are looking at your team first and saying, who's here to keep us moving forward and keeping the core values accessible to our campers and to our families, and who's having a hard time with accepting these changes. And a difference between accepting, that's okay if you have a hard time accepting, but do you still believe in the core values? So a lot of the time directors say, well, my staff would never go for that. It's kind of like who's your staff working for?
Right.
And you have to have the vision in the end. And we lost a lot of staff a while ago, and we need to make some serious changes in our camp. But we're so much better for it. And those staff members that didn't come back are now part of our alumni and excited about what we're doing today. And it was a little bit too difficult for them at that point. And change is difficult. We know that, but it's because it's threatening something that everybody thinks is going to change our core values. And you have to ask yourself, well, why would it? Why would it change our core values? Isn't it supporting it? So I think as a leader, you need to be the one that's looking at what needs to keep you current. And it doesn't mean that you're letting your campers tweet throughout camp, though maybe that's a really good thing to do. I don't know, but don't close the door at it. Just talk about it, I think, so. And Travis, you did a great session last year about those type of things and just sort of looking at your camp and marketing and some staff and some directors had a very hard time with accepting what you had to say. But it's not about accepting; it's just about talking about it and seeing if it fits with you and why.
Right. So maybe we skipped over a step in this discussion because we've talked about sort of implementing a core value or what could become a core value, but maybe part of a good place for a camp to start with this discussion within themselves is to identify what are their core values so that you're able to then evaluate the changes. So if maybe one of your core values is change, but I would say maybe that's like a core attitude, but that the value is something. It's putting campers first. It's, being willing to do anything possible to make sure campers have a good time. Or I know Laura Kugel from Camping Coast to Coast often talks about finding the way to say yes to a camper. But you have to have core values in place to develop that as a culture. So, Joe, what would you say are the core values at Pierce Williams?
Well, I think for summer camp, it's separating the two out. We have a summer camp and a retreat facility. And for summer camp, it's really getting our staff to buy onto that one line job description is our core value. And that job description is to do what needs to be done to show the campers the most amazing summer camp experience. Our staff can recite that rote. And this comes from a Michael Brandwein talk that if he shows up at a camp and he was to go up to 5 different camp counselors, why would they say they're there? And oftentimes they'll have 5 different answers as to why they're there. With this one-line job description, what you get is people understand that's exactly why they're here, to do what needs to be done to show the campers the most amazing summer camp experience. I think that's a huge core value for us. For us as a Christian camp, also doing that in a godly manner as well, in a way that reflects well on our Christianity base and how we teach kids about who Jesus is and who God is. That's all part of our core values. And getting those things in place certainly has built up the staff culture. When I arrived 10 years ago, we went through the same thing, that there were a bunch of staff here and that were just misguided at that moment in time in their camp careers because of a lack of proper leadership over a few years, or a lack of the ability to learn those things. It's hard to say. You don't want to disparage people who came before you, but it's one of those things where the people believe that when they're at camp for that summer, because a lot of staff spend 1, 2, or 3 summers at camp and then they're done. And a lot of people believe that when they're at camp for those summers, their culture is strong and their culture is healthy. It's us as camp directors or as board members who look at a culture and see the issues. And a lot of those issues come through camper numbers going down, or through the health of a business not being healthy because you don't have those camper numbers. And so when you say to staff, your culture sucks, in that blunt language, sometimes those staff are like, no, it doesn't. And what I've found over 10 years here is that those people now see what is going on now, and they're like, what's happening now is amazing.
Right.
And there's nothing to say that we didn't positively affect kids in 2005 and 2006. It's just we're doing a much better job of positively affecting more kids now. And that's the end goal, is that you want to reach so many more kids and you want to positively affect their lives. It's like I used to watch motivational speakers, and I will this weekend at a conference I'm going to, and some motivational speakers, when you talk to them, believe that when they go into that gymnasium or that presentation, they're going to touch everybody's life in that. They're going to change everybody's life in their talk. And I was always, no, like, if there's 100 or 200 or 2,000 people, if I truly affect change with 1 or 2 of those people, then I've done my job. To believe that after you motivate them, this is always my thing about motivational, after you motivate them, that motivation might only last for a day or 2 days or 3 days. What you want to do is change their perception. You want to change the way they think. You want to do that. And that's where at camp we have that benefit of not only do we train them, but we also get to influence them day to day as they go through their daily trials and tribulations and positive things at camp. So it's one of those things that I think as we go through it, we want to really take that into account, is that the core values are something that we're building better people. And if we can build better people in our staff, then they're going to help those campers become better people as well.
Yeah.
I feel motivated. You motivated me.
Well, that's good. I motivated you for this moment in time, but it's a whole, part of these CampHacker talks. It's funny. I was just a little sidebar.
Tell us, Joe.
Starting from scratch. The Starting from Scratch podcast came on in our car because in Stitcher it's just in one of my playlists.
Right.
And it came on when the whole family was in the car. So Jen is there, and Jen is my wife for those people who don't know, and Matthew and Kayla are my kids. And my kids are of the age where they're willing to listen to me talk on a podcast, even though they know that I've heard the podcast because I am on the podcast. Yeah. And we listened to that. We were driving somewhere, and so there was tons of time to listen to this hour-long podcasts. And Jen is nodding through the whole thing and saying, this is, all of these points are valid, and these are things that people need to know. And that's where motivation is one of those things, Gab, where, yeah, I can motivate you, but can we change the way people think, right? Can we adjust the way that they see the world? And I think that, and I just said to Jessica, my summer camp director today, I said, you need to listen, after re-listening to it, I said, you need to listen to the Starting From Scratch podcast, because it redefines what we can do. And if change is one of your core values, to bring it back to this topic, that podcast is one that you can get a lot of ideas for change from.
Right. Right on.
I agree, and I think that if we're talking about speakers, there's two types. Well, that's not true. There's many types, but one of the two types that I get frustrated with is when they share vision, but don't give you the tools. So like the environment's important. We need to teach our campers about the environment so that they, pass that on to their children, so and so and so forth. But then what are the tools? I find that very frustrating, because I'm like, I buy into it, but I'm like, but how? Tell me how. And I think that for this, what we're talking about right now with camp culture, and we're talking a lot about change, it's more when you're talking to your staff and your families that go to your organization, is making clear what your camp culture is, defining that, which is the first thing. And then the second thing is, what are the tools that will support this camp culture, and that's where change can be a little bit easily implemented, because we can look at each tool and say, is this working or is this not working? So, for example, for us, we want to create a safe environment where our campers can discover their true selves, whatever that may be, and it's probably changing moment by moment. But one of the things we realize is that not only the staff need to be welcoming, and we need to teach them how to do that, but we need to teach our returning campers on how to be welcoming. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we implemented, which was, we had to get our families on board. Can you bring your kids in 2 hours early? Because we want them to get that sort of excitement out of the way of seeing their old friends. Talk to them about how do we welcome other people? What does that look like? Acknowledge that it's awkward to meet new people. Why is it awkward to meet new people? Smart. But that's kind of, and then that's a change. But when we approached our returning families to do that, and that's approximately, 300, 500 people who I don't know numbers. Yeah. I randomly say numbers, but a lot of people. We hadn't had one person that said, actually, this is inconvenient for me, that we won't be able to do this. They said, wow, this is a great idea. And so when we're talking to our staff members about change, and we're looking at, okay, how do we create an environment where our girls can discover really who they are? Is this program the right program for them? Because they're behind the mission, because they're behind the vision, they're part of building those tools. But you need those. We're looking at tools and not traditions. Right. But traditions sometimes need to be shifted because they don't have a purpose anymore. And, when we're talking about motivation and we're talking about buy-in, it's sort of like make people part of building those tools, or at least looking at the tools and saying, are these useful anymore? Do we still need these, or do we need to put something in place?
All right. Right, that's awesome. I knew you had done that with staff, Gab, to bring the staff in early, but I didn't know you'd done it with campers too. What an amazing idea.
Yeah, really, it's our second year doing it, and so this will be our third year. And because we had done it, this is our second year. Some of our seniors, they had something to add in, and it was very simple. You call them. Skype is awesome. Let's Skype with your campers and say, okay, this is what we want to do. How do we want? We did this last year. Can we build on this? What would be helpful? And they're part of it. And then they understand what it's going to look like, and they know. And the reason why they want to be part of it is because they know how it feels. They want to continue that camp magic, and that's what we were talking at the beginning. Yes, we have our regular activities, and we have our songs, and we have all of those. But that feeling that people experience, for campers to understand what goes into creating that, they want other people to experience that as well.
Right. So one of the themes that I pick up from stuff you've both said, and thinking about the camps I was at this summer that I went to visit that were doing such awesome things, is part of building a camp culture. To my mind, is as a director, being willing to challenge anything that happens and being open to change. But what I think it is developing a mindset of being intentional about every single thing. When you know what your core values are, then you make sure that that applies to every single moment at camp. And, you look for every single way to make those apply. Because at the moment that you say, well, this is our culture, this is how we deal with things, except for this one instance where, I don't know. One thing that comes to mind for me all the time is what used to happen in the 70s and 80s when I was a counselor about centering campers out and teasing them or playing pranks on people, that we're a place of loving and culture and welcoming, but you're also going to get hazed. And so all of your teachings at that point just become negative. Like you've just proved to a child or to a first-year staff member or whoever that you can't be consistent, and then that betrays a lot of trust. So I think that ability to be intentional about every single thing is the key to building great camp culture, is to figure out ways to make those core values go through every piece of every day, and translate in all of that.
The one challenge that we haven't addressed is how you do this in a non-full-time setting.
Yes, you're right.
Right? The idea that, and this is the big thing when I think about this topic and I think about my home camp, being Kenesseri, I think the board wants these things to happen. I understand that the board gets what camp should be, but how do you create a culture when you're not there on a daily basis to see it?
Right.
Right? And we sent the story is this summer we sent one of our staff was asked to go down and work a week there, and he came back and he's like, man, I never want to go back. He said, I don't get how they're not there for kids and how they're
right.
And I think part of that challenge and that's the one thing where some of these people who might listen to this who aren't full-time camp people but are seasonal, if you're not on site, how do you get all of this information to people? How do you make sure that those staff have a solid camp culture? Travis, one of the best things you said to me a few years ago is, what I say and what I preach and what I do, on the podcast and whatnot, when you're out with my staff on site, and they forget you're there because one summer you spent 3 days here, so you're just this extra person, they still do exactly what I expect them to do.
Right.
And they live up to those expectations even when I'm not there to see it. And I'm not there at camp a lot to see it. I'm at camp. I'm just not – I don't supervise in a way that makes them afraid and they do it out of fear. We need to – how do we help these camps that aren't full-time – get the staff to buy into this when there's no one there to hold them account for it.
Right. And so I have two thoughts about that. If you are a board member of a camp that runs with summer-only staff and you listen to the show, which I know a number of you do, there are two ways that I can see answering this question at your own camp. One is if you can't have consistency in the director or the summer program director, if that doesn't go from year to year, or it goes for 2 years at a time, and then there's 1 a year. If there's two ways I think you can get this culture. One is to make the training consistent. So it does mean that that you either have to bring in the same people to do the training, or the board members have to be prepared to train those same things every year to make sure that that's consistent. Because consistently great camp culture involves consistency. You have to have the same elements. And with a staff that changes every year, which would be mostly, volunteer-run camps, or a lot of the faith-based camps run smaller programs that can't afford a year-round staff person, I think then the board has to commit to, we're either going to bring in the same trainers every year, it just, for 3 or 4 years at a time, so the message becomes part of everything we do, and make a long-term commitment to that trainer, or as a board member to do your part for a long-term commitment over and over again. So that's one thing. The other thing is that sometimes it helps to have a tool to make culture easy to understand. And my broken record speech is about how our camp culture changed when Beth came up with the 4S's. So what that gave them is the staff a tool to understand our expectations without us being there, and be, I think, an awesome tool for the kind of camp that you're talking about, Joe, to implement the 4S's and make it their camp culture, because it had such a profound impact on our own culture, and it also allows you as a board member to have some confidence in the decision making. So for those of you just joining recently who haven't heard about the 4S's, in order to get to do anything at camp, you had to say yes to all 4 questions. Is it safe? Does it build another person's self-esteem? Is it good stewardship of the environment? And are you being a servant to others? Basically, the golden rule: are you putting other people's needs before your own? And if you can answer yes to those 4 things, then you could do stuff. And that was about decision making, but really translated into a great culture. Because as a board member, our board didn't have to be there to know that summer staff were going to make good decisions, because they've been trained on 4S's consistently for years.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the keys, is that when you have a solid, small poster, it's almost like you can put that up anywhere, so that staff and train on that and get them into that mindset, that if it doesn't, then it doesn't happen.
Right. Okay.
I was just going to say, and that's sort of it's a little bit ahead of the times. You guys did that quite a while ago, and the Canadian government is starting to implement these self-guided guidelines. Instead of saying do's and don'ts, it's more about we want you to make your decisions. Let's base it on these norms that we've all agreed upon. And I've said it before. Waro has completely implemented the 4S's, but changed the words a little bit. And I think that what's really, really great is that it's not just about being respectful of each other, but it's also about raising each other's self-esteem. Mm-hmm. So you're not just, and I think that's been a very, very helpful one for us within our staff and our campers, that they understand that their behavior is not just to be respectful, but it's also to make people feel good about themselves. And yes, that's helped with a lot of the changes, a while back, ghost stories were still acceptable at camp, but does this raise people's health, emotional safety? And not really. So it really added to a lot of shifts, and it's a great guideline. I would definitely recommend people to look at it and use it in the way that makes sense to them. But it's simple and it's clear, and it also teaches campers and staff to problem solve, and make their own decisions, that's life lessons that we're hoping all of our staff and campers are learning from the different camps that they're attending.
Yeah. One of the great, when it comes to being intentional at summer camp, you don't find many better than Beth Allison at that, looking at every aspect of it. And one of the things that Beth says that makes so much sense to me as it applies to camp culture is that one of the biggest problem in the world is, in terms of how people get along, is all self-esteem related. And if you have people who have good self-esteem, then they are not going to be bullies or do other things to raise themselves up by putting others down, etc. And if you're a young camp director and want to think about a way to establish yourself as a good camp leader and develop a good camp culture, then I would advise you start at always looking at how does this build other people's self-esteem. And that is such a transformational idea in camping, and building a culture that staff respects, that parents admire, etc. It's one of the things I think would be a good key place to start looking at building camp culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Gab, do you have any other final thoughts about camp culture, building a good camp culture before we move on?
I think, I think that really what it comes down to is that you're picking that one point, that one sort of North Star,
Yeah.
to follow, and everything that you do has to help support that vision. And you want everybody on camp to be there because of that vision. Children, your kitchen staff, maintenance team, and your counseling staff, and make them part of that, and ask them questions. And that, I think that's the way. What Joe was talking about with change, it's not because we're saying you need to change, that's the only way to have a healthy camp culture. It's asking the questions, can we do it better, and helping them be part of that. I think is what's going to make your organization a strong one.
Yeah. No, right on. Any final advice from you, Joe?
Camp culture, I think, is about that consistency, and it's one of the things we've discussed here in London Conference with United Church Camps, and that consistency is the camps that are most successful currently are the camps that have a consistent camp director. The camps that are like us full-time, and like Camp Imini, they've had Carol for close to 10 years as well. I think the having something solid to hang your hat on, the 4S's, is another really strong point, and how to train those staff and put in the time, potentially as board members or other, consistently having someone come in to train with those expectations. And I agree, camp culture is something that is ever evolving as well. Because if you get stuck in one camp culture, then you're going against the whole concept of change as it is. So as we move forward, we'll keep growing and seeing where it leads us, and how these people and how this generation changes what we see as well.
Nice. Great. Well, thank you both for some great ideas. It's now then time for us to move on to our tool of the week.
Tool of the week.
For those who may be just joining us on YouTube or found the show on iTunes or Stitcher, our tool of the week is something that each one of us believes helps us become a better camp director, a tool that helps us with that. So we have some great tools today. I wonder, Gab, if you could start us off with this awesome tool.
Yeah, I'd love to. Joe mentioned it a little bit in the podcast, Back on Track. This is a tool that Beth Allison has put together. She's on the Camp Code podcast that I'm on as well, and it's featured on CampHacker. And basically, the reason why I chose it for today is that it does help organizations to evaluate their camp culture and where it's going. And it's a wonderful tool to do with your staff members, especially your leadership team staff members, after the summer or coming into the new summer, and seeing where do we need to implement change, and have a good reasons behind why we're doing those changes. I think it's very, very clear, and it's really user friendly, and that's why I like it. I think that it explains things in a way that can help you explain things to your staff. So I really like it, and I think you should pick it up. You can get it digitally, and I think you can print it as well. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a great tool. I really liked it, yeah.
Thanks, Gab.
No problem.
Yeah, our staff just went through a one-day workshop with Back on Track. And the question I then put to my summer director was, can we use this tool similarly with to do a camper parent one-day retreat as well?
Nice. It's just
I think you
try
can.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Joe, you've got a great tool that I use all the time.
I do, and I'm glad that it can be my tool today. Travis introduced me to this maybe a month ago. It's called Canva.com. And what Canva.com is, I just used it this morning actually to create every month I put a new backdrop on my wallpaper on my computer, and I used it to do that this morning. But I've used it to promote Think Camp, to promote our Because of Camp segment, which is something we do at Pierce Williams, and I've used it to create numerous promotion things. It's a graphic. It makes graphic design accessible to almost anybody. So I've shared it with my office admin person who's not a graphic design person, and Canva really allows you to make something look really nice without having to do all of the little things that graphic designers know have to happen for it to work. It doesn't fully replace graphic design by any means for me, because what I want graphic design to do is much different but it's a very simple, easy tool to put words on a poster, to make a selection of different photos. It's very handy.
Right on. And it's free.
And it is free. I think, do you still need to be invited, Travis? Is that the...
I don't think so anymore. I think it's open to anyone.
Yeah, so it's great. It's well worth the time. And you can create something in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes that looks very professional and is very high quality. And it's free as long as you use your own photos and whatnot. If you start using some of their paid stuff, I think it's 99 cents per thing for their stuff. So
exactly how they make
really
their
cool.
money is the stock images that go with it for 99 cents each.
I'm on it right now. It's really
Yeah.
awesome. Just the opening page is really fun. You guys keep talking. I'm
Okay.
playing here.
Kat's going to be doing design stuff. Right on. My tool is, I often talk about getting stuff into your brain faster. Those are often my tools, and this is one I thought I'd done before, but I can't find it. So if it's a repeat, my apologies. It's from a company called eNotes, Enouce. And the app is called My Speed, and it just installs a small little app on your computer that allows you to watch videos faster. So I've talked about, I know for sure I've used a tool of the week on the iPad that does the same thing, that you can watch a video on the iPad sped up, you can change the speed. But if you're doing some, need to learn something as part of an ongoing project, sometimes you need the things to go a little bit faster. This puts that ability on your computer. So YouTube Vimeo videos you can watch at a faster speed. So I find most videos you can still take notes and get stuff out of it if you listen to it at 1.7 or 1.8 times the regular speed and still comprehend it. And it's also the voices sound pretty normal in the thing. So they pitch shift it back into a normal pitch. So cool tool for getting through a bunch of training, for evaluating if you're looking at YouTube videos for something, evaluating a product or something, you just use it that way, and allows you to get through things. It also worked this morning on videos that a client sent me on Google Drive. I was able to get through those faster because they played on my browser, and they went through faster that way. So it's really cool, that thing. So it's called eNotes My Speed, and it's available online. If you go to our show notes, you can see all of these tools of the week, and you can search through each show. In a world where I had a bit more time, I'd love to create a page just called Tools of the Week on CampHacker, where we collect all these, because I know people love the tools, and was really why I chose to put it in the podcast, because I love the idea of sharing cool little things that help out. And so I encourage you to go check out the old shows and look through to the tools that are in each one of the show notes from each show. So that's all, again, available at camphacker.tv/podcast. Before we move to say goodbye to Gab and to Joe, I just want to encourage you to go to camphacker.tv/iTunes, and that will open up the iTunes account, open up your iTunes account and give you a chance to write a review for our show. And reviews and ratings help so much as a podcaster, because it's really the only way that people get some social proof as to whether or not a show is worth listening to. I think consistency is one, and we're really pleased to be entering into our third quarter century of shows, this being our 76th show. But it's nice to hear from people outside of the podcast producers, whether they like the show. So we've had some great reviews from some very consistent listeners that we really appreciate. And if you go to camphacker.tv/iTunes, that's really helpful to us. So that wraps up our discussion about building great camp culture today. We thank you very much for listening. What I want to do is just give our hosts a chance to let you know how to get in touch with them before we wrap things up. So, Joe, I really appreciate you being on today. It's been awesome.
Thanks. If people want to find out more about what I do, they can go to yoyojoe.com, yoyojoe, or they can go to find out all about Pierce Williams, campisbetter.com. And all my stuff is there.
Right on.
Not hidden.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
And Gab, where can people find out more, get in touch with you?
They can follow me on Twitter at Gabrielle Rail, and they can check out where I work at waro.com.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gab, for joining us from Montreal.
Yeah, no problem.
Right on. And so we appreciate everybody joining us, and we love all of our great, consistent listeners. We've had some great feedback this fall about the show. If you have any ideas for the show or topics you'd love us to cover, then please email me, travis@camphacker.tv. We also want to take a time right now to thank our editor and producer, Matt Hansberger, who goes in and edits these shows when we're done with them and puts them up on CampHacker so they're available. And he does all this as a volunteer. So we're so grateful to Matt for taking that project on. You certainly make CampHacker possible. And thank you. It's been awesome having you with us for so long. Again, go to camphacker.tv/podcast to find the show notes for the show. Thank you for listening, and thanks for the evening, friends.
The CampHacker podcast is brought to you by Beth and Travis Allison, summer camp leadership training and marketing consultants. Thanks for listening. CampHacker, bringing your world into focus.
Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.